Hey, thanks for checking out this video. We're going to cover the basics of Sass, and then we'll create a project from scratch and deploy it, and I'll show you how you can easily include Sass in your workflow. And I want to give a big thanks to Bo and freeCodeCamp.org for publishing this video. FreeCodeCamp is an awesome resource, and on behalf of the community, thank you for all that you do. So before we get into this video, I'd like to quickly let you know who I am. I'm a husband, a father, and a programmer. I've got over 2 decades of IT experience. I'm a full-stack developer. I recently decided to create a YouTube channel, and initially I just wanted to help people. But after my first couple of videos, I realized that it's actually helping me to become a better programmer. I do research for every video, and a lot of times I come across things that I didn't know or a better way of doing things. So I'm learning and teaching at the same time. It's a win-win. So my channel is new, but I upload new videos every week. I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd check out my channel and subscribe. And that's enough of this. Let's get into the video. So we're going to go over the basics of Sass and set up our environment, and then we'll go through a project from beginning to end using Sass. There's timestamps in the description if you'd like to skip through certain parts. So what is Sass? It's a CSS extension language. It gives your CSS superpowers. Once you see how easy it is to write and how logical and organized it can be, you'll never write plain CSS again. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's look at what you need to write CSS. First, you'll need a code editor, and I recommend VS Code because it's open source and it has great extensions and awesome community support. Now, your browser can't read Sass, so it has to be compiled into plain CSS. But don't let that scare you, it's easy. There's several ways that we could go about this. We could use Node.js to run a compiler that will watch our Sass files and compile them automatically for us. Or we could use Gulp to do the same thing. Or we could use an extension in VS Code. And for this video, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use Live Sass Compiler. Another extension that we're going to use is Live Server. If you're unfamiliar with VS Code and how to set it up for web development, I do have a video on that. I'll have a link in the description below. Alright, I'm going to quickly walk you through installing the Live Sass extension. So in VS Code, we'll go to Extensions and we will search for Live Sass. And there you'll see Live Sass Compiler. Go ahead and click on that and then click Install. And after that's installed, we're going to look at some settings. So let's go to our settings and then we'll search for Sass. And then click on Live Sass Compiler there. And then you'll see in the format settings, we're going to want to change the save location. Now these settings are a personal preference. By default, it will compile your CSS and put it into the same directory. And I prefer for the compiled file to go into my distribution folder. So we'll click on Edit in Settings JSON. And then here we're going to add some settings. So these are your options. So the default is at the top here. Format is expanded, so there's no compression going on. The extension name is .css. And then the saved path is null, so that means it's going to go into the same directory as your Sass files. So you could also change the format to compressed if you want, and it will go ahead and compress and minify your CSS all in one shot. And then you can change the extension name to .main.scss, and then you see there where we can put it into our distribution folder. So I'm actually going to do just a combination of the two for this video. We're going to keep the format at expanded and the extension as .css, and we're just going to change the save path to /dist/css. And then we'll save that and we're good to go. Alright, now that we have all of that set up, let's create a standard folder structure here. So I have a new project folder that I've created and I opened it in VS Code. And let's go ahead and create a folder here called dist. And then within our dist folder, we'll create an HTML file, index.html. And we'll use emit, we'll use exclamation, enter, get a template here, and we'll just name this Sass tutorial. And then we'll add a link here to our CSS. So currently we don't have one, but we will be adding it. Notice the extension here is CSS, not Sass or SCSS. So this CSS file is what's going to be compiled eventually once we've created our Sass files. Now, before we create our Sass files, it's important to understand that there are two syntaxes supported by Sass. So there's the SCSS syntax, and it uses the file extension SCSS. And this stands for Sassy CSS. It's basically a superset of CSS, which means essentially that all valid CSS is valid SCSS as well. I'll show you that in a minute. But because of this similarity, it's the easiest syntax to get used to and the most popular. Now the other syntax is the indented syntax. And this was the original syntax for Sass. And it uses the file extension .sass. The indented syntax supports all of the same features as SCSS, but it uses indentation instead of curly braces and semicolons. There are a few other minor differences, but we're not going to be using SASS in this video, so we're not going to go over those. Alright, so we'll be using the SCSS syntax, and so let's go ahead and create that structure. So be sure you're in the root of your project and go ahead and create another folder here. And we're going to name this SCSS. And then within here, we're going to create a main.scss. Alright, now that we have that file open, we've got our extension installed, so now you should see this watch Sass at the bottom. So go ahead and click on that. And you're going to see an output here. We'll see here that it's watching for our Sass files now, and it is compiling and generating them automatically, and now it's watching for us to save the file again. And when we save it, it's going to automatically recompile and create that CSS file every single time that we save the document. And so we didn't add this CSS folder here, but now we have a folder in dist, and so that extension created the folder and it created our CSS file. And of course we don't have anything in our Sass file, and so I don't expect to have anything in our CSS file either. So remember, we said that any valid CSS is also valid Sass. So let me show you what I mean by that. So here in our Sass file, we can add, let's just do something generic here. We'll say body, background, and we'll set it to blue. And I'll hit save. And it automatically compiled our CSS for us. So now if we go to the CSS file, we'll see body, background, blue, just the same as we see it here. So we can write plain CSS in our Sass file and it will work just fine. So I also have a live server installed, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that, go live. And here you see we have a blue website. So an important note here is that we should never modify the CSS file, only modify the SCSS file. Every time the compiler runs, it's going to overwrite the CSS file. So the first Sass feature that we're going to look at is variables. Now you might say CSS has variables too. And that's true, CSS does have variables now. But Sass has had variables long before CSS. Currently, CSS variables compatibility across browsers is about 90%. So that's pretty good, and I don't see any reason not to use CSS variables. But when you use Sass variables, they don't compile into CSS variables. They compile to the actual value. So let me show you what I mean there. So in normal CSS, we could add variables like this. So now we could set our background here using a CSS variable, just like that. And so now if I save this, you'll see that our CSS file is pretty much identical to the SCSS file. And if we switch over to our website, we now have a gray background. So now let me show you the difference between this and the Sass variables. So with Sass, we can get rid of the root, and instead of the dashes, we'll add a $sign. So a $sign indicates that it is a variable. So instead of calling var, we will just input the variable. And I'll save this. We'll switch over to our website, and it's still gray. And let's look at our CSS now. We don't have any variables defined. It puts the actual value there. So using Sass variables has 100% compatibility across browsers. Alright, next let's talk about maps. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, you could compare maps to arrays. Maps are lists of key value pairs. So I'll create one here. So we'll define a variable and we'll name it font weights. And then to define a map, we start with parentheses. So we enter a key, so we'll say regular will be the key, and then the value will be 400. We'll enter another one. We separate these by commas, so we'll say medium will be 500, and then bold will be 700. Okay, it's probably not the best example, but you can create a map of colors or different things. So that we have something to really add this to, let's put some HTML markup in here. So we'll add a div with the class of main, and then we will put a paragraph, and we'll just put some lorem in here, 50. Alright, so now on the body we could apply a font weight globally if we wanted. To get a value out of the map, we'll use map get. Alright, and so it's looking for the map, and that would be font weights. And then the key would be, let's say, bold. So this may seem like a bit much, but if we have our font weights defined throughout our CSS in many different areas, and for some reason we want to change the way that the normal, medium, or bold font looks, let's say we want bold to actually be 900 instead of 700, I can change it in this one spot instead of searching through all of my CSS and changing it on each individual line. Now before I save this, let me pull up the website. Oh, and our text. We forgot a text color. Let's apply our color, and we'll set that to text color. Now we see that everything is in bold. So this looks at our map, and we tell it which key to look for. It finds the key, and then it extracts the value, and it puts the value here as font weight. So if we go to CSS, we'll see that. Our font weight is set to 700. All right, next let's talk about nesting. So nesting might be one of the best features of Sass, but depending on how big your project is, be careful with too much nesting. Using classes that can be reused instead of nest after nest is much better. But to demonstrate nesting, we will look at our paragraph here. So we have a div with the class of main and a paragraph. So let's look at the main div first. Let's say that we want to center it and add some margin on the sides. So we'll set the width here to 80%, and we'll set margin top and bottom to 0, left and right to auto. And this is just plain CSS, so if we go here, we'll see now it's centered and we've got some margin on the sides. Alright, so now if we wanted to style our paragraph, normally we would have to do main and then paragraph and do it like this. Or we could just do paragraph, and that would globally change all of the paragraphs. But we don't want to do that. With Sass, we can nest. So within main, we could just do this. And let's say we just want to put that font weight only on this paragraph. We'll move it down here. And I'll save that. Switch, and we'll see. Same thing, nothing has changed. And if we go to our CSS, you'll see that it has written it as proper CSS so that the browser can parse it. Now if we want to do this properly, let's add a class here to the paragraph. We'll set it to main paragraph. And then, so instead of targeting the tag directly, we could do main paragraph. If I save that, now it compiles properly into CSS. But with Sass, we have some shortcuts. So instead of typing main again, we could take this part out and we can use an ampersand. So ampersand equals the parent. All right, so let me save that and go to our CSS. Now it's not quite right because it's main_paragraph on its own, not within the main parent. So to fix that, we actually have to use something called interpolation. And what that means is we don't want just .main paragraph. We want everything before it. So we have to wrap the ampersand in hashtag curly braces. And so now what we could do is add a hover on the paragraph. And so we want to add that on the paragraph, not main. So we'll nest that again. And this time we'll use just one ampersand. And we'll use :hover like we would normally. And then let's just change the color to pink. All right, and now I'll save this. And if we go to our website and we hover over it, now it's pink. All right, and let's look at our CSS. Let's see what happened here. So we've got everything separated as it should be in CSS now. So let's talk about separating files. So with Sass, we can create partial Sass files that contain little snippets of CSS that you could include in other Sass files. So if we're working on a large project, it's a great way to modularize your CSS and make things easier to maintain. A partial is simply a Sass file named with a leading underscore. So the underscore lets Sass know that the file is only a partial and that it should not generate a CSS file. So the compiler is going to ignore those files that begin with an underscore. So let's create a partial here. Make sure that you're in your SCSS folder, and we'll create a new file, and we're going to name it _resets.scss. Alright, now in this resets file, we're just going to include our normal resets. So we will do a box sizing of border box, margin of 0, and padding of 0. Alright, just some normal resets there. I'm going to save that. And then in our main SCSS, we'll want to include them at the top here, because generally we'll have our resets at the top. And so to include that, we will use an @import. And then we will indicate the name. So notice here that we don't have to put the underscore or the extension. So now if I save this and we look at our main CSS, it has compiled our resets into our main CSS from the partial. And also notice that the vendor prefixes are automatically added by the compiler. So what we could also do is we could create another file here, and we could name it _variables.scss. And then in our variables, we could take all of these and we'll put them into our variables partial. And I'll save that, and then I'm going to use Alt-Shift down arrow to duplicate that, and we'll include our variables. So now if I save that, you'll see that the variables are still working. So by using partials, we could separate major components into partials, and this is especially helpful when working with a team on large projects. We can break up the components and work on them individually. Alright, so now let's talk about functions. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, functions in Sass are very similar. So to create a function, we'll put it here at the top, and We're going to say @function to define that this is a function, and then we will name it. So this this map get and the font weights down here, it's a bit much. It's kind of ugly. We can shorten that up, especially if we're going to be using it all over our CSS. So we're going to create a function that is called weight, and then we're going to open parentheses, and we're going to put an argument in here. We're going to put a variable of weight name, and then we're going to open it with curly braces. And within the function, we're going to return, and we're going to use map get, and we're going to target the font weights, and the key is going to be our weight name. So this variable here is going to be passed within our Sass file whenever we call it. So instead of map get down here, we're going to use the function name weight, and within that we'll pass it the weight name that we're looking for. And if we change this to regular, it would return the regular weight. So let me save this, and we'll go to our CSS. Now we're looking for the font weight. Let's see what it is. Font weight of 400, right? So that's our regular font. If I go back here and change it back to bold, and we check our compiled CSS, now it's 700. Right, now we'll move on to mixins. And so mixins are similar to functions. So to demonstrate this, let's add some more HTML markup. So I'm going to just duplicate this this paragraph here. I'm going to use Alt-Shift down arrow, create another paragraph, and I'm going to save that. And then back in our Sass file, in the main here, let's say we want to display this as flex. And we want to justify the content center and align items center. If you haven't learned CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid, I have videos on those as well. I'll put links in the description below. Let me save this, and let's switch over to our website. And we see now that our paragraphs are side by side because we define them as flex. So by default, that is going to flex to a row. Go back to our code here, and let's just say that we have many of these flex boxes that we need to create. And we don't want to type display flex and justify content and align items a million times. So we'll go up here and we're going to create a mixin. So @mixin, and we're going to name this, and we'll name it flex center. And then within flex center, we're going to put all of this content that we don't want to repeatedly type. And now within main, instead of typing all of that, we will include the mixin. So @include and then flex center, just like that. Now I'll save that, and let's check out our CSS. And in our main, we've got all of our flex. And again, it's added all of the vendor prefixes as well. Now, similar to functions, we could also pass an argument into the mixin. So let's say we want to pass it direction. And then we could define flex direction as direction. So now instead of including flex center, we're going to also include an argument here. And by default, it is a row, so let's define it as column. And I'm going to save that, and let's go back to our website. And now you'll see that they are in a column and not a row. And of course, if I change this to row and save it, and now you'll see they're in a row. All right, so mixins and functions are very similar, but just remember that functions should be used to compute values and return values. Mixins should define styles. Another example of a mixin is choosing between a light and dark theme. So by default, right now, our website is a dark theme. So we could add a mixin, and we'll name it theme. And we're going to pass it a Boolean value. So we can assign Boolean values to variables. So we will say light theme, and by default we're going to set it to true. So now, again, if you're familiar with JavaScript, in Sass we can use if statements. So we're going to say if light theme, so it means if light theme is true, then we're going to set background. Now currently background is set to primary color, but what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this in a lighten, and then we can tell it how much to lighten it by. We're going to say 100%. So it's basically going to invert the color. And then we will need to set the color as well. Currently that's set to the text color. The text color is white by default, so we're going to need to do the opposite. So we're going to darken the text color, and we're going to do that by 100%. Alright, so now to use this, we're going to create a, let's go down here at the bottom, and we're going to create a light class, and we're going to include our theme, and we're going to pass it that variable, so light theme true. I don't have to actually type this light theme. I could just say true. This makes it a little bit more identifiable. Alright, so let's save this, and now we need to add this class somewhere. So let's just add it to the body for now. Class of light, save that, and now let's go to our website. Now we have a light theme. And so now if we change this to false, let's see what happens. It's still a dark theme. Even though we have the class of light on body, it's still a dark theme. How is that possible? So let's look at our main CSS. We've got our body here, our main, all of our main paragraphs, but there's no light theme here. We go back to our SCSS, and we've got it included here. Well, we've included the theme and we've said false. So if we go up here to theme, so if it's true, it's going to add these CSS styles to the light class. If it's false, it's not going to add anything, so that means the light class is empty. So when the compiler runs, if it finds a definition that's empty, it's just not going to include it in the CSS at all. Alright, so if I go back here and I change this back to true, let's look at the compiled CSS, and now we have our light class. Alright, back in our main Sass file, mixins are pretty cool. So I'm going to show you one more mixin. This one has to do with media queries. So we're going to create a mixin, and we're going to call it mobile. And then we're going to use a media query. So just a normal CSS media query. We're going to say max width of, let's just say 800 pixels. And then in here we want to include content. So this content will be passed when the mixin is called. Now what we also could do, instead of defining this this width here, we could actually use a variable, and it would be better to use a variable because if we ever wanted to change it, it would be easy to change. So we're going to create a variable here called mobile, and we will just set that to 800 pixels. And then back here in our Sass file, instead of putting the value there of 800 pixels, we'll just include the mobile variable. Alright, so now let's see, what did I miss here? Content, there we go. Now to include this, let's say if the width gets below 800 pixels, we're going to want that to change to a column. Alright, so here within main, so here we're going to include our mixin, so include, and then that is going to be mobile, and then within this, basically view this as your media query. So what do you want it to do when it's below 800 pixels? So we're going to say flex direction column. All right, let me save that, and I'll switch to the website. All right, so let's make this smaller, and there you go. Once we get below 800 pixels, it changes to a column. All right, and then move it back over. It's back to a row. All right, and then if we ever need to change the widths, we have the variables here where we can change our widths. All right, so now let's talk about extensions. So we can extend an element, and so the element that we extend it to would then inherit all of the styles from the selected element. So to demonstrate that, let's go to our HTML. We'll change the classes to paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. All right, so now here we will change this to paragraph 1. And so let's say that we want to extend all of the styles of paragraph 1 onto paragraph 2. We want them to look the same, but we just want to change one or two things on paragraph 2, and we don't want to have to retype all of the styles on both paragraphs. So we could do this. We have to interpolate again the ampersand, and then we'll do paragraph 2. And then here we could extend main paragraph 1. And we'll save that, switch, and now they're both identical just as they were before. But now we want to make a change to this paragraph. So we've extended all of the same properties, but let's say we'll use hover again. And this time we'll change the color to our accent color. All right, and so now we have our accent color. So if there was a bunch of styles here in paragraph 1 and we didn't want to retype everything, we could just extend from that class onto this class. The last thing that we're going to look at is operations. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So in normal CSS, we could do calc. And then, I don't know why we'd want to do this, but if for some reason we wanted to subtract 40%, that would work just fine. But in Sass, we don't need the calculation, and it will work just like this. We'll hit save, go back, and just the same. Now, one thing to note, with the normal CSS calculation, I could do minus 400 pixels, and see, this will work just fine. But with Sass, we can't mix types. So the operation has to be of the same type. So if we're using percentage, they all have to be percentage, or they all have to be pixels. So now let's see what that looks like in the CSS. So we have 80% minus 40%. So now we just have the result of that, which is 40%. So if we use the normal CSS calc, let's look at what the compiled CSS looks like. So it's going to go ahead and pass that entire calculation into our normal compiled CSS. All right, so that's pretty much the basics of Sass. So if you want to learn more, you can look at the documentation on sass-lang.com. Sass is very powerful, and once you get the hang of it, it's hard to go back to normal CSS. All right, now let's look at a real-world example. So this is what we're going to build, a portfolio website. It has this cool animated menu and several pages, and the menu along with the entire website is responsive. And we're going to take a mobile-first approach when we build this. So here I've got VS Code open, and I've created a project folder on my computer, and then I opened it in VS Code. And all that I've done so far is I created a dist folder along with an image folder, and I just brought in the images that we'll be using in this project. I will have a link in the description below so that you can download the project files as well. So in the dist folder, let's start out by creating an index.html file. I'm going to close the sidebar by pressing Ctrl B. And now let's start with our HTML markup. So we'll use emit, exclamation, enter. That gives us a boilerplate. And let's title this, we'll just go with Mike Smith portfolio. We're also going to add our style sheet, which will be created for us from our Sass. So we'll add a link and we'll set that to CSS main.scss. In the body here, we're going to start out with a header. And then we'll create a div with the class of menu button. And then within here, we'll create a span with the class of menu button burger. So the menu button is going to be pure CSS. We're not going to use any images or fonts for that. Now within the header, let's create a nav. We'll have a class on that of nav. And then we'll create our menu items. So we'll have a UL with the class of menu nav. And then our LIs will have a class of menu nav item. Alright, now we'll have a link with the class of menu nav link. And that is going to go, so our first one will be home, so that's index.html. And we'll name that one home. Alright, so now we're going to take this li and we're going to duplicate it down 3 times. So Alt-Shift down arrow, 1, 2, 3. So in our home, this is the page that we're on right now. So we're going to set this li to active. And then the next one will be our about. And so we'll say about me. The next one is our projects. We'll say my projects. And the last one is our contact. And we'll say contact me. Alright, I think that's it for the header. Let's go to our main section now. Alright, we're going to start with a main tag. And then we'll have a section and we'll have a class of home. And then we'll create an h2. And in here we'll say, hi, my name is, and then an h1 with the class of home name. And here we'll put the name, so Mike, and then we're going to have a span with the class of home name last. Home name last. And then here we'll put the last name, Smith. And then we'll have an h2, and this will be his titles, web developer, designer, and programmer. All right, now we're going to add our social icons. We're actually going to put that in our section still. So we'll add a div with the class of social icons. And then a link. And that's not going to go anywhere. And then we'll add the icon. So we're going to use Font Awesome, and I'll show you how to set that up in just a minute. So we're going to use an icon with the class of FAB and another class of FA Twitter. And we're also going to add a class of FA times 2. Alright, and then let's take these 3 lines and copy that down 3 more times. And then we'll change Twitter to Facebook. then Instagram, and GitHub. Alright, and then after that, one last thing is a footer, and that's just going to contain our copyright. So we'll do ampersand copy for the copyright symbol, and then copyright, whatever the current year is. We're going to have some basic JavaScript. We're going to include a script with a source, and the source will be JS main.js. Alright, I think that is it for the markup. So let's look at the Font Awesome. We also have to add something here for that. Alright, so this is Font Awesome's website, and they recently changed things up a little bit. You actually have to sign up for a free account. So I've already logged in, and I'm just going to go to my kits, and here's the kit that I have. And so what we need to do is to copy this script and put that into our HTML files. So I'm just going to hit copy code, and then we will put that here. Alright, so I think that is it for the index.html. Let's go ahead and save this, and we'll see what this looks like. So I have live server installed. So if you just right click here, you can say open with live server, or you can see there's some shortcut here. You can see that that looks pretty ugly. There's no CSS. So okay, so let's start with our Sass. I'm going to open the sidebar by pressing Ctrl B, and then make sure that you're in the root and create a folder SCSS. And then within SCSS, we're going to create a file of main.scss. And we're actually going to start with, let's create another file, and we'll name it _config.scss. So that's going to be a partial. And we're actually going to create partials for all of our elements. In a large project, that's what you would do. You would separate everything into partials. This isn't a large project, but we're going to go through that workflow so that you can see it. Let me close the sidebar here, Control B. In our config, we're going to have our variables. So we'll have a primary color, and that's going to be a dark gray. And then we'll have our secondary color, and that will be an orange. And then we'll put our resets in here. So box sizing, border box, margin 0, and padding 0. Just some standard resets. Alright, I'm going to save that, and then we'll go to our main CSS. And the first thing we need to do is import that config. So we'll say import config. And we don't have to put the underscore or the extension. Alright, first let's look at the body, and we're going to set the background to the primary color. And then we'll set the text color. For now, we'll just set that to a white. We're going to come back to that in a minute. The height would be 100 VH. So 100 view height, view that as a percentage. So basically it's 100% of the available viewport height. We're going to change the font family. I like the Segu. And we're going to set the line height to 1. Alright, now we're going to target our H1, H2, and H3. And I want the font weight of those to be a little bit less, more normal, 400. And then we've got some links in here, so we're going to target all of the links globally. And we're going to set the color to white for now, and the text decoration to none. Alright, and then let's look at our header. So for the header, we want it to have a position of fixed. We need it to always be on top of everything else. So we're going to set a z-index of 2, a width of 100%, and a padding of 1 rem. So if you're unfamiliar with rem and em units, so rem units are based on the font size of the body. So the default font size of the body is 16 pixels, and so one rem would be 1 times 16. 2 rem would be 2 times 16, so that would be 32 pixels. If we change the font size of the body to 20 pixels, then 1 rem would be 20 pixels, and 2 rem would be 40 pixels. Em, it's pretty much the same thing, except it's not based on the font size of the body, it's based on the font size of the parent. Alright, so now let's go to our, main. Let's target the main here. And we'll set a height of 100% and a width of 100%. And then we'll start doing some nesting. Let's target our social icons. For those, I want them to be position fixed with a bottom, so from the bottom 1 rem, and from the left 1 rem. Within the icons there are links, so let's target those. And we want a padding on those of, let's say, 0.4 rem, and then on hover we're going to change the color. We'll set that to our secondary color. Lastly, we'll target our footer, and we will set the font size on there to 1 rem. We're going to set a fixed position on this as well, because we want that to be at the bottom. We'll say bottom 0.4 rem, and then right 1 rem. We'll do a text align right, padding of 1 rem, and we'll set the color on that to white for now. So before we save this and load it, we actually have to initialize our Sass extension. So we're running the live Sass compiler extension. So what we'll do is we'll hit watch Sass. If you don't have VS Code set up, I've got a video with the web dev setup where we walk through the installation of these extensions. Hit watch Sass, and it opens up an output here, and it's watching, and it is compiling our CSS every time that we hit save, and it automatically updated with live server. If we go to our files here, we can see that it created a CSS directory, and we have our main CSS here. Alright, so that is still not looking great. Let's look at some CSS that is directly applicable to the home page. So what we're going to do is we're going to create in the SCSS folder, we're going to create a new partial, and we'll name it home.scss. Alright, so in here we're going to target our home class. And we're going to set the height to 100%, put a padding on the top of 40 VH. So again, view that as a percentage, 40% of the available viewport height. And we're going to set the overflow to hidden. We don't want any scroll bars on the home page. It should always fit. We're going to align items to the center. And we'll do a text align center, and then let's set our background. So we're going to have that picture, and that is URL. We need to go up 1 level, so /image/ and then it was model-1.jpg, and then we're going to set a background size to cover. Alright, let's just save that and see what we have so far. Oh, and we have to go back to our main, and we have to import that home. So import home, save. Alright, so I think the image is here. It's just, let's expand this. Yep. So the image is actually there. It's just not positioned properly yet. So what we're going to do back in our home, on the background, we're also going to set some positioning. So we're going to say center top. That's a little bit better. Now the image is too bright. It's too white. So we're going to put an overlay on top of it, and there's several ways to do that. You could use HTML markup and then target that and create an overlay that way. You could use pseudo elements, but we're actually going to do it right here in the background. So we're going to add a linear gradient, and then we're going to say we want the gradient to go to the right, and then we put in our colors. So we're going to use RGBA, and then that takes the first part of it, takes your color. So we're going to set primary color. We're going to use that variable, and then we will set this to 0.9 opacity, and then we'll do another RGBA for the second gradient value, and again primary color, and we could do 0.9 again and have it the same across, but we're going to set the right side of it to 0.3, and then we need a comma here. Alright, let me save this. There, that looks a lot better. Make sure that you're still within the home class, and now we're going to target our underscore name. So this is going to be the home underscore name. The ampersand, remember, ampersand always refers to the parent, so it's the same as typing .home underscore name. Okay, so in here we're going to set our font size to 5 rem. We'll set the padding on the bottom to 1 rem, margin on the top of 1 rem, and we're going to set a border on the bottom, and we'll set that to 2 pixels solid, and for now we're going to set this to white. And then within that name, remember we have a span that goes around the last name, and so that was ampersand, which is going to be the same as .home underscore name -- last, and we're going to set the color on here to the secondary color, and the font weight, we're going to increase that one up to 700. Alright, let's save this. It's looking pretty good. Alright, so when we're hovering over these icons, the color just kind of pops right in. So I'm going to add a bit of a transition to that. So back in our config, let's add a mixin. So @ mixin. We'll name this transition ease, and then we will set a transition, and we'll set all 0.05 seconds ease in out. Okay, so normally on a transition I would target what we're trying to transition. Is the color, is the position, what is it? Here we want to reuse this. So when I include this mixin, I want it to target any transition that it can. Set it to a 0.5 or half a second ease in and out. Alright, so let me save this. Let's go to our main, and we had a hover in our social icons right here. Alright, and so let's add the transition on the link. So we'll do, to include the mixin, we do include, and then the mixin name, transition ease. Alright, let's save this, and now let's hover over them. You see that it's slowly changing the color. Okay, so now let's look here at our color. We have it set to white, but in our config we have the ability to change the primary and secondary color. So if we change the primary color to white, then you won't be able to see the text. So what we're going to do in our config is we're going to create a function that is going to give us an appropriate color for our text. So to create a function, we'll do @function. And this is a lot like a JavaScript function if you're familiar with JavaScript. So we're going to set this to set text color. And we're going to pass it a variable of color. And then we're going to use an if statement. So we're going to say @if and then lightness. We're going to evaluate the lightness of the color that we're passing it. So if the lightness is greater than 40%, then we're going to return. We'll set this to black. Alright, so if the lightness is greater than 40%, so that means it's a light color, then we want to return a dark color, so black. And then we'll do else. So if it is a dark color, we want to return white. Alright, so now we can use this function instead of declaring the color. Go back to our main here. So instead of white, we're going to call set text color, and then we're going to pass it our primary color. So it's going to evaluate this primary color, which is dark, and it's going to return us the white value. So anywhere else that we have the color set, we can swap that out. So we'll say set text color, primary color. Let's see, did we set that anywhere else? I think there was one other spot. Yeah, on the footer. So set text color, primary, there we go. We'll save that. Nothing's going to change, obviously. So we also had it here on our border. So this line that goes across in the middle here, we're going to set that as well. Set text color, primary. All right, I think we're good there. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good except for our menu, of course. So let's get to work on our menu. So let me open up the sidebar here, and we're going to create a new partial. So underscore menu.scss, and I'll close the sidebar, and let's see, first we'll target the menu button. We're going to set that to a position of absolute. Set the z-index here to 1, right 1 rem, and top 1 rem. Okay, so we're going to absolutely position this. So we want this in the top right corner. We'll set the height to 20 pixels and the width to 28 pixels. And when we hover over this, we want a cursor pointer. And we're going to include our transition mixin. So include transition ease, because we're going to be adding some transition animation to this. Alright, so within the menu button, we have our menu button burger. So we can do ampersand underscore burger. And this one we will again position absolute. We're going to say that this one will be right 0, and top is going to be 0.5 rem. The width of 28 pixels, height of 3 pixels, and the background will be our set text color. And that's going to be our primary color. And again, we're going to include on this one our ease transition. Alright, and so let's save this and see what we have. And actually, we have to remember, back in our main, we have to include this. So import, and that was menu. Alright, and so now we have a line, so that's just one line. And so again, let's look at the HTML. So the menu button is basically a wrapper, and we're using this, we're going to be using this as our click event. Within the menu button, we're going to have our bars for the hamburger. We just configured the middle bar. And so we set it to 28 pixels wide, 3 pixels high, and the background color is going to be the text color, which is going to be white. And so now what we're going to do to create the other two bars is we're going to use pseudo elements. So within the burger, so we're going to use ampersand before, and with the pseudo element we have our content, and we'll set that to nothing. We have a position of absolute. We'll set the top to -8 pixels, so we want it to move up 8 pixels from its initial position, and the width will be 28 pixels, height of 3 pixels, background color will be the set text color, and we're going to also include our ease transition. Okay, and now let's save that, and now we have our top bar. Alright, and so now to add the bottom bar, we're within the burger class still, so we're going to use ampersand after, and we're basically going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to copy this, and then instead of 8 pixels up, we want to go 8 pixels down, and I want the bottom bar to be not the same width, so we'll set that to 20. Alright, and then let's save that. There we go. So now we have our menu button. Okay, so now on the menu button, we're going to have it animate a bit. So again, still within the burger, through JavaScript, we're going to assign it an open class. So when the open class gets applied to the menu, we want it to transform, and we're going to rotate 720 degrees. And then we're going to set background to transparent. Let's save this for now, and we'll come back to it. Let's go ahead and look at the JavaScript. So let me open up the sidebar, and in our distribution folder, let's create another folder, name it JS, and then within JS, let's create a file. We're going to name that main.js. Alright, close the sidebar. Let's start by targeting our DOM elements. So we'll set some constants here. We're going to set the menu button, and we'll use document.querySelector, and then here we can query by tag or by ID or by class. So we'll use class here. Menu button was the class. Alright, and we'll create another constant of hamburger. So the menu button, again, that's basically the wrapper, and then the hamburger is our span. So we'll do document query selector, and that was menu button burger. Okay, so then we're going to create a variable called show menu. We're going to set that to false. So initially the menu is not shown. And then we will add an event listener to the menu button. We're going to listen for the click event, and then we will toggle menu. We'll call this function that we're going to create here. So we're going to create a function called toggle menu. And so we'll start by saying if not show menu, So the exclamation is a not operator. So if show menu is false, then we're going to get that hamburger class, and we're going to target the class list, and we're going to add open. So we're going to say that it's now open. Then we'll need to set our show menu to true. So now we know that the menu is open. And then we'll put our else statement. So if the menu is open, we want to do the opposite, right? So hamburger class list remove open. So just the opposite. And then we're also going to want to set our show menu back to false. All right, so that's it for the JavaScript for now. We'll add a few more lines in a minute. But let's save this and let's see what it does. So there we go. It rotates and the middle line becomes transparent. So if I click it again, it should go back to normal. There we go. So that is the first part. So the goal is to make that turn into an X. So now what we'll do here is in our open class, we're now going to target our pseudo elements. So we'll do ampersand before. So this is targeting that top bar, and we're going to set the transform rotate to 45 degrees. And we're also going to add a translate. Translate moves it, and the first value is going to be your X, or your horizontal position. So we want to move it 5 pixels over. And then the second value is your Y, or your vertical. So we want to move it down 8 pixels. All right, let's save that and see what we have so far. There we go. That's part of our X right there. Okay, so now let's target our after. So ampersand after, that's going to be the bottom line. Now remember, the bottom line was a bit shorter, so we need to actually change that. So we'll say width 28 pixels, make it the same as the top now. And then we will add our transform with a rotate of, this time will be a negative 45 degrees to make that other side of the X. And then we will translate this one to 3 pixels over and negative 7 pixels, so move it up a bit. And I had to play around with these numbers to get it to work just right, but this is what I came up with. So let's save that. And now when I click it, we should have an X. There we go. All right, pretty cool. Okay, so now we want to show the menu. All right, so for the menu, let's target the nav. And on that, we want the position to be fixed. And the top of 0 and a left of 0. A width of 100 view width. So with view width, it's the same as view height. So 100 would it'd be like saying 100% of the available viewport width. We're going to set the opacity to 0.98. So just want to see a little bit behind it. And initially we're going to set the visibility to hidden. Okay, so within the nav we're going to do the same thing in JavaScript, and we're going to add a class to it. So it's going to be the same thing. We're going to do the ampersand, so it's going to be nav.open. And then if it is open, we want to change the visibility to visible. Still within the nav, let's target our menu nav. Alright, and then in the menu nav, we have our menu items, the home, about me, my projects, contact me. So we're going to display those as flex. And then we're going to, let's see, flex flow, we'll set that to column. And then if for some reason we have a weird device height, we'll set this to wrap. We're going to align items center, justify content center. We want the height to be 100 view height, overflow hidden. We don't want any scroll bars ever on our menu. We're going to set the background to the primary color. We'll do the list style. So let's get rid of those bullet points. Let's do a padding on the right to let's see, 1 rem. And then we'll do a transform and translate. Actually, we're going to do a translate Y. We'll set this to a negative 100%. Then we're going to include our ease mixin. Alright, so what this is doing, if you're not familiar with Flexbox, I have a video on that as well. You can check it out at my channel. So what we're going to do on the menu is we have it translate Y, so that is going to be your vertical. And we have it set to a negative 100%. So that means the position of the menu is going to start off the page at the top. And when we click the button, we want it to come in from the top. So what we'll do here is within our menu nav, when the menu nav gets assigned the open class, then we want to transform translate Y to 0, so the initial position. And we're going to need to go into our JavaScript and add some more lines here. So we need to also target our nav. So that is going to be document query selector nav. And then we will also need our menu nav, which is the UL. That was menu nav. Alright, so we have those, and so now we're going to do the same thing in here. We'll take our nav class list, add open, and then our menu nav class list, add open. Alright, so I'm just going to take these, copy them down here, and we're going to change add to remove. Control D to select multiple of the same. So if I highlight remove, I can Control D and select all 3 of them and have 3 cursors. That's a good little shortcut to learn. That's it for the JavaScript for now. Let's save that and let's see what we have. So now you see that the menu items are gone. So now when we click on this, there we go. Now we need to format our actual links here. So let's go back to our menu Sass. Okay, so still within our menu nav, we're going to see it was menu nav underscore item. So we're going to target each item. The menu itself is coming down from the top, but we want the menu items to come in from the right. So we're going to transform translate X this time. So X is your horizontal. And the initial value is going to be 100 view width. So we want the links to be all the way off the right side of the page. We're going to include our transition mixin. And then in JavaScript, we're going to add the open class, just like we did on the others. And when it's open, we want to transform translate X to the initial position. So that will bring them in from the right. We're also going to add an active class to our menu items. And then we're going to target the A, the link within. And we want to set the color on that to the secondary color. And so that's just going to highlight which page you're currently on. And then in the JavaScript, we have a couple more lines to add. All right, we're going to add a constant here of nav items. and we'll do document, and we can't do query selector because that selects one element, so we're going to use query selector all, and we're going to get an array of elements here, and that is menu nav item. Alright, and so then down here we need to add that open class to these. So what we'll do is we'll do nav items, and we'll use a high order array function. We'll do for each. We're going to use an arrow function here. So we're going to loop through the items, and we're going to pull, each time we're going to pull one item out. And so in the function we'll say item.classList.add open. Alright, so we'll do the same thing down here, except instead of adding, we're going to remove. Alright, and that should be everything for the JavaScript now. There's nothing else that we're going to add in here. So let's see what that does now. Alright, they came in, if you can barely see it, they come in pretty quickly from the right. But at the same time that the menu is coming down, so it's not very noticeable. So let's add some more Sass to our menu. Alright, so now make sure that you are within the menu nav still. Alright, and we're going to use ampersand link, so this is going to be a menu nav link. We want to display these inline block. We're going to do a font size of 2 rem, text transform to uppercase, padding top and bottom of 2 rem, 0 left and right, font weight of 300, and we're going to include our ease transition, and then on hover we're going to do a color of secondary color. Alright, let's save that. Let's see what we have now. That looks pretty good, but see, they're coming in all at the same time and they're coming in too quickly. Let's go into our menu Sass, and then all the way at the bottom we're going to include a for loop. So very similar to JavaScript if you're familiar with that, at for, and then we're going to declare a variable of I, and we're going to say from 1 through 4 because we have 4 links. Alright, so now we're going to target our menu nav item, and we're going to target the nth child. And we can't just put the variable in here. You see how it's highlighting red? It's telling us that you can't do that within a function. So we need to wrap this with $ curly braces. So now we've targeted the nth child. So this is going to iterate through the links. So the initial one is going to target the first link, then it's going to count up 1, so that will be the second link, the third link, the fourth link. So on each link we're going to do a transition delay, and in here we can use the variable as it is. So we're going to do the variable times 0.1 seconds, and then we're going to add to that 0.15 seconds. I know this is a complicated formula, but it's what I came up with. Alright, so it's going to iterate through each one, and it's going to add a delay to each one, so they should stagger in. Alright, let's save that, and now let's see what we have. There we go. Alright, so let's look. Something is a little bit off here. Let me go. Yeah, okay, actually here in the home menu, the margin bottom, or the margin should be margin bottom on the name. So it's a little bit off right there. So let's save that. There we go, that looks much better. So that's going to be it for the home page. So now let's look at the about page. So let me open the sidebar here, and in the distribution folder we want to add a file, about.html, and let's go ahead and add the Sass file for that as well. We'll add the partial underscore about.scss. Close the sidebar. Let me close some of these. We don't need the JavaScript anymore. We shouldn't need the menu. Alright, so let's start with the HTML markup. We're just going to begin with the index.html. We'll copy everything from there, paste it into about, and let's say about Mike Smith. Alright, the menu, the nav, let's take the active off of the home and we'll put it on the about. And then let's look at our section here. Let's change this to about. And then this first part of the section here, let's delete, and we'll add a div, about, bio image. And then within here we'll have an h2 with the class of text secondary. And we'll say bio. So we're going to add a class here, text secondary. So this will be a reusable class. Anything that we put it on will have the secondary color. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to our main Sass file, and we'll just put it right here. We'll do text secondary. And this is just going to change the color to the secondary color. Alright, and let's go ahead while we're in here, let's add our about Sass partial. Right in here, let's add a paragraph, and we'll add some lorem in here, 30. Now under this, we're going to have some jobs, almost like a small resume. We'll add a div with the class of jobs. Another div, jobs, job. So each job. So the first one, we'll put an h2 with the class of text secondary. And let's say 2017 to current. And then we'll do an H3. We'll say that he works for Google. And then an H6. And his position, full stack developer. And then we'll add a paragraph with some more lorem. I'll put 20 on there. Let's take this job here and let's duplicate it 2 more times. So Alt-Shift down, 1, 2. Alright, so let's change this one to 2015 to 2017, and let's say that was Microsoft, and let's see, front-end developer. Then the last one here we'll say 2012 to 2015, and we'll just make something up, web design co, and we'll say graphic designer. Alright, then everything else, we want the social icons, we want the footer, yeah, everything else is the same. Okay, so let's, got all that, yep, let's save this. Let's go into our Sass file. Alright, we'll start with our about class. Let's add a padding on here to the bottom. We'll add 2 rem. And then within here we have our about bio image. Here we'll set the height to 50 view height. The width will be 100%. And then we're going to do the same thing with background that we did in the home page here. So I'm going to copy this and paste that there. And then on here we'll have we'll display as flex. and we'll set the flex direction to column, align items center, and then justify content, we're going to use flex end. Okay, now still within our about, let's target the paragraph. That's the bio paragraph. We'll set a margin on the bottom there of 2 rem. Alright, let's just see what we have so far. We'll save that. Alright, we'll go to About Me. It's already looking pretty good. So we set the view height to 50%. We got the image back there with the overlay. We've got the title here and the paragraph displaying as flex. Set it to a column, and so that we can align center and then flex to the end. We still got a bit more to do here. We put why does that say block end? Margin bottom. Alright, so we put this 2 rem margin on the bottom so it wouldn't go all the way to the edge. Actually here, this paragraph should have been here. So we have to be careful with nesting. Nesting too much can become an issue. I didn't want to target all of the paragraphs. So I actually missed something here. We forgot to wrap this. We needed to wrap this in an about bio. Alright, so now let's target, still within the about, let's target the about bio, and we'll set the width here to 80%, and then text align center, and then I want to target the text secondary. So that's the heading. I could just target the heading directly. There's many different ways of doing things, but we'll just target the text secondary, and I want to add a padding on that on the bottom of 1 rem. Alright, let's check that out. There, that's looking good. Alright, so now let's style our jobs. So still within about, we'll go to jobs, and then within there, let's set the width to 60 view width, so 60% of the view width. I'll set a margin on here of 2 rem top, auto right, 0 on the bottom, auto left. We're going to display this as grid. We'll set the grid template columns to initially 1 fractional unit, and then the grid gap will set to 2 rem. So if you're not familiar with CSS grid, I have a video on that as well. Check that out in my channel. Alright, let's see what we have so far. Alright, looking better. Now within jobs, we have jobs job, so each job. We're going to have a background, and we're going to lighten. So we're going to use the primary color, and we're going to lighten it by 10%. And then we want a padding. We'll add 0.5 rem all around, and then a border bottom. We'll do 5 pixels solid and secondary color. Alright, that's looking good. Everything's a little squished together, so within the job here, let's just go ahead and target the headings directly. We'll say H2 and H3. We'll set those to a margin top and bottom of 0.5 rem and 0 left and right. On the H6, I'm going to set the top and bottom a little bit less, so let's go 0.3, 0 on left and right. There we go. That looks pretty good. Alright, so now notice the social icons and the copyright are getting in the way a bit. Alright, so let's go down here, still within about. Let's target our social icons, and this time we were going to display these as flex, and we want to set the flex direction to column. Alright, so now they're out of the way. That looks good. And we need to do something with the footer now. So let's target the footer. And we're going to transform. We'll start by rotating it. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And we're going to translate or move it. The x value will be a -3 rem, and the y value will be a -5 rem. I had to play around with these numbers as well, so there you go. We flipped it up and put it on its side. Now it's out of the way as well. Alright, so that is it for this page. We'll get into the responsiveness once we're finished with all of our pages. Alright, so now let's move on to our projects page. So let me open the sidebar, and in dist, let's add another file, and this is going to be projects.html. And then let's go ahead and add our Sass file as well. We'll add the partial underscore projects.scss. Alright, close the sidebar, and now what we'll do here is let's just use the about. Let's copy everything from there into projects, and then we'll modify it. Alright, so we'll say Mike Smith projects, and let's take the active here and let's put it on the projects link. Alright, so let's rename this to projects. And I'm actually going to have the image in here as well, so let's rename this to projects bio image. And then within the bio image, we'll delete this. We'll add an h1 with a text secondary class, and we'll say my projects. Alright, and then let's get rid of the jobs here. Alright, so now here let's put a div with the class of projects items. That should be projects items, and then projects item. Alright, items and then item. Alright, this time we're going to use an image, and the source is going to be image and then project 1. For the alt, I'll just put my project. Alright, under this we're going to have a div with the class of projects buttons. Alright, so we're going to have an overlay over these, and there's going to be some buttons within the overlay. So in here, let's add a link, the class of projects button, and that's not going to go anywhere. And then we'll put an icon here, and it's going to be FAS, FAI, oops, not gas, FAS. Alright, and then after that, let's say preview. Alright, and then let's take this link, and we're going to Alt-Shift down arrow, copy it. We want 2 links here. This one is going to be, instead of I, it's going to be GitHub. And actually, since it's a brand, we have to change to FAB for brand. And let's change this to GitHub. Alright, so that is one project. So let's highlight this, and we're going to duplicate it. We have 6 total projects, so we're going to duplicate it 5 times. Alt-Shift down arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, let's go back up to the first one. Alright, here's the first one. And all we're going to change on these is the project image. Everything else will stay the same. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Alright, and then everything after that, the social icons, the footer, everything else will be the same. So let's save this. Let's go ahead and check that out. It's going to look ugly. Yeah, okay. Can't really tell what's going on there. So let's go to our Sass. And the Sass here is going to be pretty close to what's in the about CSS, well, for the most part, the top part anyway. So let's just copy this and we'll make some adjustments. Alright, so this is going to be projects. Padding bottom to rem is good. Image, this time I want it to be 30 view height. Background, all of that's good. Flex, column, center, flex end, all of that's good. So here's where things will change up a bit. We'll take the paragraph out. We're going to target the text secondary. And I want the font size to be a bit bigger. Set it to 2 rem. And I want the margin on the bottom 2 rem. Alright, and then we don't need this. Alright, so here a lot of this is the same, so we'll change jobs to projects items, so that's the wrapper. Alright, so let's take this part out, and then we also have projects item. So on the item, we're going to set the position to be relative because we're going to need to absolutely position other items. We're going to set the border bottom to 5 pixels solid and the secondary color. We want the overflow to be hidden. We'll talk about that in a minute. Cursor pointer. Now within here we have the image and we want the width on those to be 100%. Right now they're way off the page. Alright, let's stop there and let's see what we have. Well, I keep forgetting in our main Sass we need to import that. So let's import our projects. Save. That looks much better. Alright, let's get back over here to our Sass file. So that's looking okay. We're going to do something with these buttons now. Let's go in here and we're going to create an overlay. This time we're going to use a pseudo element. So we're going to use, this is the projects item, and then we'll create an after. We have our content. We'll set that to blank. Position here is going to be absolute. That's why we have the parent container set to relative. Alright, we're going to initially set the top at 100%. So that is going to push it all the way to the bottom. Initially it's going to be under its element. And so that's the reason why we set the overflow to hidden. That way we don't see it. Because when we hover we want it to pull up from the bottom. Alright, we're going to set left to 0. Set the height to 100%. And the width to 100%. We're going to set the background to the secondary color. And opacity initially is going to be 0. And let's include our transition. Alright, that's looking good. Now that's really not going to do anything. Let's save it. You'll see it really looks the same because that item is hidden. So let's create a hover event here. So this is going to be the item, ampersand, hover. And what we're going to do is on hover, we need to target the pseudo element. So that's going to be after. We want the top to be 0 instead of 100%. So that's going to put it back where it should go. And the opacity, I want to set it to 0.09. I just want to barely see through it. Alright, so let's save that. Now if we hover over it, there we go. It comes up from the bottom and becomes visible. Alright, so now we still have these buttons to deal with. Okay, so we're still in the item. Alright, and what we need is projects buttons. So projects is the main. So we're going to have to come down here and make sure that we're not under the item, we're under the projects. So ampersand buttons. Here we're going to set a position of absolute. Top is going to be 0, height of 100%, width of 100%. We're going to set a z-index of 1. We're going to display these as a grid. So let's do our grid template columns. And these will always be in a 2-column layout. So we want the preview to be on the left and the GitHub to be on the right. So we're going to use repeat. We're going to say repeat twice, 1 fractional unit. So that will make them equal. And we're going to align items to the center and text align center. Okay, let's save that. And now they're there, but I only want them to pop up when I hover. Let's target the individual buttons now. So projects button. Here we're going to set the opacity to 0 initially. We're going to set the color to the set text color based on the secondary. We want to base it off of the secondary because that's what's going to be behind it. Alright, and then let's include our transition. And now we need a hover, so ampersand hover. On hover, I want the text color to change. So we're going to say color, and let's see, we can do this. On orange, I think that's going to return a white, but when I hover over, I want it to change to black, just to show that that I'm hovering over it. And so I want it to be the opposite. So I know that this is white. So I can, it's kind of a hack, but I can wrap that in another set text color. And so that's going to set the text color against white, which is going to be black. Now what we need to do is I want the button to display when I hover over the project item. So in order to do that, I have to go to the project item here, and we'll go to our hover event, and after the pseudo element, we'll do projects button, and then we'll change the opacity to 1. Alright, let's save that. Let's see what we have. Okay, the hover's not working. Why is this set to column rule? Color. Sorry about that. Alright, let's see. Okay, it was opposite. Alright, so initially this is black, and then when I hover over it, it changes to white. For the social icons in the footer, they're great. We're going to leave them just like that. Alright, that's all looking good. So now let's look at the contacts page. Let me pull out the sidebar, and under dist, let's create contact.html. Let's go ahead and create our Sass partial underscore contact.scss. Alright, so let's go ahead and in the main, let's go ahead and add that before I forget. And that was contact. Alright, let's use the projects.html. We'll copy that. We'll paste that in the contact. and we'll say contact Mike Smith. Alright, and then let's change our active here to our contact link. Change our section class to contact, and then everything within here we can go ahead and remove. So we're going to add an H2, and we're just going to say contact me. Alright, and then let's add a div with the class of contact list. And then we'll add a div with the class of contact email. Within here we'll have an icon, FAS, FA envelope. And then we'll just say email there. And then we'll have a div with the class of text secondary. And within here we'll put the email, so we'll just say email at email.com. Alright, so let's copy this down twice. Alright, and so we have an email, we also have a phone. That's going to be mobile alt. We'll say phone, and this, we'll just put a number in here. There we go. And then this last one is going to be address. And for that we'll use the icon marker alt. And we'll say address, and then just put a generic address, 123 First Street, Houston, Texas. Alright. Everything else past here we're going to keep the same. Alright, let's save that. Let's go to the contact page. It's going to be ugly. There we go. Alright, so let's go to our contact.scss. So from here, this one's going to be a lot like home. So let's just copy all of this from home into here. Change this to contact. Alright, so we're going to have a view height of 100%, padding on the top 40, view height. Okay, so here we're going to change this. We're going to display this as flex, and we're going to set the flex direction to column. Background is good. We're going to use that same thing. Alright, and so then everything after this, we can take that out. So here we're going to target the H2, and we're going to set the font size to 3 rem, and margin bottom to 2 rem. And then we're going to target the contact list. We're going to display this as grid. So get our grid template columns, and initially it's going to be set to 1 fractional unit. We want a grid gap of 2 rem, and we're going to change the font. We're going to change the font size to 1.5 rem. All right, and then yeah, let's save that. See what we have. All right, that's looking okay so far. Let's see. I think I missed something here. Flex column. Yeah, we need to align items center. There we go. So that is all of the pages. Let's go through. We've got our main page here, and then our about me, and projects, looking good. All right, and then the contact. Actually, you know what I want to do on the contact? I want to change the social icons. I want them to be up here. So right here, let's do social icons Let's change the position to initial, and we'll set a margin top on there of 2 rem. Yeah, I like that better. It's all in the same spot to contact. And next we'll make this responsive. Alright, let's see what this looks like before we make any responsive changes. Actually doesn't look terrible, but obviously we don't want to have this menu when we're at this size. Let's see the other pages. That actually doesn't look terrible either, but we'll make a few changes here. Maybe make this text bigger. And let's check out projects. Oh, yeah, that's too big. Yep, we'll need to adjust that grid, and we'll make these inline instead of stacked. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is we'll go to our config in our Sass file, and we will go, and then at the bottom we're going to include some mixins. So at mixin, and we're going to create a mixin for some media queries. So we'll start with a medium size, and so we're going to include in this mixin a media screen, and we'll put a minimum width of 768, and then in here we will put add content. So now when we call this mixin, whatever content will get passed into this media query. Alright, so that's for the medium size. Let's go ahead and just copy this down, Alt-Shift down. We're going to create 2 more. So we're going to create a large, and that is going to be 1024 pixels, and then we're going to create an extra large, and that will be anything over 1600 pixels. Alright, and we'll save this, and let's start with, let's just go back to the home page here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new Sass file. I'm going to name it _ responsive.scss. Alright, and then let's go to our main.scss, and let's include that. There we go. Save that. So now in our responsive, we're going to include our media queries, those mixins. So we're going to include media medium. We'll start with the smaller sizes and work our way up. So let's start with the menu. So menu button. At this size, we want the visibility to be hidden. And then our nav, we want the visibility of this to be visible. And then within the nav, we have our menu nav. And we need to make some alterations because we don't want the full page nav to come up. We want a nav bar at the top. So let's change this display here to block. By default, it's fixed. Then we're going to transform and translate Y because we had that all the way at the top. So now we need to put it back in its place. And then let's set a height here to 100% that is available to it. Set the background. Currently it has the dark gray background, the primary color. So we're going to set that to transparent. And then we're going to text the line to the right. Then within here we have our items. So that is menu nav item. And we need to display these in line. Alright, and then we're going to add a padding on the right of 1.5 rem. Then we need to target the menu link. Then on the link we're going to change the font size because we made it bigger earlier. So by default I think it was 3 rem. So we're going to change it to 1.5 rem. Let's see what we have so far. We'll save that. Alright, now let's check it out. So when we get over 768, there we go. Nice, that looks good. Back. Alright. Let's see what we need to do on the About page. Yeah, I think we'll just make this text a little bit bigger as we go. Yeah. Okay, so outside of, so we're still inside the media, the medium media query. We're outside of the nav. So we're going to add an about bio, and then let's change the font size to 1.5 rem. Make it just a little bit bigger. Alright, let's see. Yeah, that looks good. Yep. Alright, let's look at the projects. So it's one column there, and then, yeah, we're going to want to change that. So let's target projects. And then within the projects, I think it was the bio image. Yeah, the height's on there because, let's see, when we get, yeah, that's getting a little too close, I think. So let's change the height to, I think it was 50 initially, so let's go 40 view height. And then projects, items. Let's change the grid template columns, and we're going to change that to a repeat 2 of 1 fractional unit. Alright, and then this my projects, we probably need to increase that a bit. So that was, so we could target the text secondary. And we'll change the font size there to 3 rem. Alright, let's save that and see what we have. Yeah, that looks good. Alright. I don't think there's anything, let's see, let's go to contacts. Yeah, so let's make this 2. Let's add contacts, contact list, and we want the grid template columns, and we'll do the repeat 2 1fr on that one as well. Alright, and let's see. Yeah, that's good. Alright, so that is on medium screens. So let's move on to the large screens. A couple of things that we're going to change here. So let's include that mixin media query. So include media large. I think projects. Yeah, let's make projects. Let's turn projects into a 3 column at a large layout. So let's see, where was that? We could take this, paste it here, get rid of the bio image, and close that out, and change this to a 3. That should work. Let's save it. Alright, medium size 2, large size 3. Yeah, that's good. Alright, and then let's do the same thing for the contact. Let's change that to 3. So I'll just copy this, put it there, and change that to 3. Save it. 2. There we go. That looks pretty good. That looks good. Alright, and then the last part, let's see. Let's go to projects. So, yeah, right in this area, the image is getting too close. So I want to increase the height on this on an extra large screen. So let's go to our last mixin. That's the large media query. So let's include, that's the extra large. And so let's here, that was projects, bio image. And then let's change the height to 50 VH. There we go. That looks good. All right, and then let's see. We could make this have a fourth column possibly, but I think it looks good. So let's go through it real quick. We've got the main screen, looks good on a big screen. And go down to a small screen, looks good as well. We have our menu. All right, let's go to our About Me. That looks good. Let's go to a larger screen. Now I could take these and turn them into columns as well, but I like the way that they're stacked because of the years. So the current is on top and then it goes down. So I'm just going to leave this as a column. I think it looks better. And then projects, we already looked at that. That looks good. And then contact. So that looks good as well. Nice. All right, so let's talk about deploying this. So we're going to deploy this today on GitHub pages. We could also use Netlify, that's another good one. But I went ahead and uploaded the project to GitHub. And if you're not familiar with Git and GitHub, I have a video on that as well. You can check out on my channel. But it's very simple. So I've got this uploaded and we're going to go to settings. And then if you just scroll down to the GitHub pages portion, just set this to the master branch. All right, and let's scroll back down. And now it says your site is ready to be published. So we could set a custom domain if we want. I'm just going to leave the default there. So now if we go here and go to dist, there we go. So this is live on the internet now. So that's going to be it for this video. If you stuck around to the end, thank you for watching. Alright, so before you go, if you liked this video, a thumbs up is appreciated. I upload new content every week, so hit subscribe and the bell to get notified. And if you think this video or any of the videos on my channel might be helpful to someone else, please share them. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at CodeStacker. Thanks for watching.